Hello and welcome once again to RWR Plays TEW. Our WCW Lives On series continues with Chapter 9, where we have finally reached the Great American Bash. As you can see on the screen right now, it's taken us 5 episodes of Nitro to get here, but we have finally arrived. We've managed to get through all of the stories that bring us to this point, and now it is time for the big show and the big occasion. Before we get there, though, first of all, it'd be great if you've been following along and you want to continue to follow along. If you could subscribe, that would ensure that you obviously don't miss an episode. But also, I want to go through a couple of things within the game. I said at the beginning of this series that there will be some people watching, I imagine, who haven't played TEW before. So I've been trying to gradually introduce some of the concepts of the game as we go. And one of the things I wanted to look at before this the pay-per-view we're going to do, because this is kind of the pre-pay-per-view bit of the show and it feels like a bit of a special episode, I thought I would do, review some of the other bits of the game that we haven't really looked at in any great detail. So what I wanted to do is look at, for example, the popularity, kind of the size of the company screen. And we have looked at this a couple of times, but what you may have noticed here is that originally in America, the vast majority of the regions of America, the size of our company, the popularity of WCW was at 55. It has increased by 2 since the game began, which is a really good start. And in the southeast and mid-Atlantic, where I think it started at 59, it's now moved up to 61. So gradually we are increasing in popularity everywhere in America, and I think the same is true of most of the rest of the world, although perhaps to different rates, because they have different we have different levels of exposure in these different areas because of the various television deals we've got. Now, the important thing here, as I've sort of touched upon before, is the Southwest popularity, because in the game, that is where WCW is based. The idea being that the story moved WCW from being owned and based in Georgia to instead being based in Las Vegas, which means we are in the southwest region of the USA. And what that means is that we need to get this popularity up to 59 in order to become a medium-sized company. And of course, this is all part of the game mechanics and not real-life kind of stuff. But the idea is that if you move up to 59, you then become a medium company. And what that means is you're more likely to get higher attendances, more sponsorship, more other companies might be willing to do business with you. So, for example, I'm trying to forge some kind of talent trade agreement with either New Japan or All Japan, but neither are willing to actually do any talent trading with me because they don't think I'm big enough, even though I'm the second biggest company in the world. And that's simply because my size is not at medium, whereas New Japan, who don't have, internationally the same following in the game, but they are at large size because they're much bigger in Japan than we are in America. So that's another thing that it impacts. It'll also impact the types of or the broadcasters that we can do deals with and get exposure on. So the bigger the size of your company, obviously the more chance you've got of being able to forge relationships with other broadcasters. So all of that's really important. So the good news is that so far all of our shows have contributed to increasing our popularity quite significantly, to the point now where we're just 2 popularity points off of being a medium-sized company, and we just need to increase that in the Southwest to make it there. Now, what this means is that the way you increase your popularity, you'll have seen at the end of each episode when I kind of show the kind of the recap of what's happened, you get a rating for the overall show, and if that rating is higher than your popularity, then it will increase your popularity, and if it's the same, then it will stay the same, and obviously if it's lower, then you'll start to see a reduction in popularity. So we just need to keep making our shows better than our popularity level. Of course, the difficult part of that is the more popular you get, the harder it is to ensure that your shows are good enough to continue to increase your popularity. That shouldn't be a problem for a little while yet, because our shows tend to have been about 65-70 in general, but somewhere between those two. But it's something to keep an eye on as the game continues. Another part of the game that I wanted to show you was the top 100s page, which I always think is quite cool. So this basically gives you your top 100 various different things. This is my top 100 events, for example, top 100 matches, attendances, buy rates, TV ratings, viewerships. The one I wanted to look at was matches, because this is the one I kind of find quite interesting. So at the moment, our best match was Booker T versus Sting, and that got a rating of 80. Harlem Heat versus the Steiner Brothers, 77, and so on. And we've had, so far in the history of the company, we have put on, or at least the history of the company since we took over, we put on 62 matches. Now, The reason I bring this up is because I wanted to compare it with WCW in 2000 and the cage match ratings. So what I've kind of done, and this may be completely erroneous, this might not make any sense, but the way I'm seeing it is that if you get a rating of 77, say like the Harlem Heat versus Steiner Brothers match, you divide that by 10, that's a 7.7 out of 10 rating, because ultimately the rating's out of 100, so it makes sense that it's a 7.7 rating. So if you compare it to cage match, which obviously is a ridiculous comparison, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's a little bit of fun. These were the matches in the year 2000 in WCW that had a rating over 6. So there's actually only 12 matches all year that had a rating over 6. We've already got 12, and we've been running for 6 weeks. So, I mean, I'm not saying that that's a comparison in terms of the overall quality of WCW now compared to in 2000, but what it does mean is that we have successfully shifted the focus of WCW from being a promotion which was not really about matches at all in 2000 back to being one that is much more heavily about good, strong matchups and putting on good wrestling. And I think that was a really big key focus for me in terms of what we were going to do with WCW, because for me, WCW had more of a history of being the wrestling company as compared to WWE's more kind of storyline-based, company of the two. And that kind of changed in 2000 and 2001. 2000 and 2001, WWE had its best in-ring years, to add to the fact that it also had pretty much all the most popular and most over wrestlers in North America. So it was such a stark difference between the two. But I felt like WWE needed to get back to doing what it was famed for, which was putting on, more of a focus on wrestling. Not even necessarily better wrestling, but just more of a focus in general on wrestling. And that's what we've done so far. I think we've achieved that already. So that's a really kind of good news story. The other thing I want to do before we go into the Great American Bash is, of course, look at the last episode of Nitro. The big happenings really from the last episode of Nitro was that Sting, after his match, or actually as part of his match with Curt Hennig against Road Warrior Animal and Jeff Jarrett, was hit by Jeff Jarrett with a guitar and was then stretchered out of the arena. And so there are questions going into this pay-per-view around his involvement at the War Games match. Then later in the show, Booker T retained the WCW World title against Ric Flair, but after the match, as Booker T and Ric Flair were shaking hands, there was footage shown on the big screen of Stevie Ray having been attacked, and Booker T running backstage to check on him. And there, of course, now it questions over his involvement also at the War Games. So all those questions hang over us as we go into this pay-per-view, in addition to all the rest of the story that we've had building into this, the various different personal feuds. Obviously, Booker T, Scott Steiner has been in pursuit of Booker T from the beginning of the relaunch. He wants a title shot, and that's what the War Games match is all about. We've had Ric Flair and Curt Hennig's feud, now something brewing between Sting and Jeff Jarrett seemingly, and also something brewing between Ric Flair and his attitude to the rest of the Magnificent Seven. You'll remember that they were cynical about the fact that Ric Flair won the draw of straws, which meant he got the title shot against Booker T on Nitro, and then Ric Flair looked surprised when he saw Stevie Ray down and out backstage when it came on the big screen. So just a few questions about what the hell's going on, who's going to be involved in this match, whether Sting's going to be available, whether Stevie Ray's going to be available, and therefore what's going to happen. So without further ado, let's go to the Great American Bash. So the first thing that I want to draw your attention to is that this one is being held in front of 17,210 fans in Phillips Arena in Georgia. I'm assuming that will be in Atlanta, Georgia. And that is because we are running for the first time a show in the Southeast. And this shows the difference between being a 61 popularity company and a 59 or 57 as we are currently in the Southwest. So it's just a huge difference in expected attendance. Now obviously that would be different for Nitro. Nitro wouldn't draw anywhere near as much as that, but that's a big old attendance for this show. We start with a dark match, as is the usual way we start things off. It's Shawn Stasiak versus Johnny the Bull, and Shawn Stasiak wins the match in 6:56. Shawn Stasiak a 44, Johnny the Bull a 26, and they have good chemistry fighting each other. This one got a segment rating of 42. And then in our second dark match of the evening, it's an 8-woman tag match with all the women involved in the round robin for the women's title. It did, and an abysmal pre-show match: Angel Orsini, Jillian Hall, Cara Slice, and Ronnie Stevens. And Alexis Lurie defeat Ronnie Stevens, Amber Neal, Kana, and Jazz in 6 minutes 13 when Cara Slice pinned Kana. Segment rating of 21. Everybody in double figures, and they are gradually improving in their popularity. I did check this in the game, and they are gradually getting a little bit more popular. Not massively so, but some of them, for example, had 0 levels of popularity in the various regions of North America, and they are starting to pick up a little bit. So we should gradually, and very, very gradually, see an improvement in the match quality of the things involving these women. So then we move on to the main show itself, the Great American Bash, and we start with a 6-man tag match. Chavo Guerrero Jr. and Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo defeat Shane Helms, Jason Jett, and Lash LaRue in 10 minutes and 2 seconds when Elix Skipper pins Jason Jett. Shane Helms looked really good with a 55, Chavo Guerrero Jr. a 50. Elix Skipper not bad either. Kid Romeo is lagging behind a little bit behind most of the others, but that's not a huge problem for me. And this was really just to keep the Shane Helms and Chavo Guerrero Jr. story ticking along. They've obviously been in a feud for a little while, and this is just to kind of keep them kind of simmering. Segment rating of 50, a really strong start to the Great American Bash. Up next, we get Mike Tenay and Jerry Lawler discussing Sting's team in the War Games match, and some footage is shown whilst this is going on of Sting, Booker T, and Curt Hennig all arriving separately to the arena earlier in the day. Lawler speculates about Sting's physical condition after being carried out on a stretcher on Nitro, and Tenay chips in by speculating about where Booker T's head is, with Stevie Ray seemingly not available tonight as he's not arrived with Booker T. So the segment rating here of 69, and this is just to kind of ask some questions about what's going on tonight. It appears that Sting is here and able to compete in the War Games, but maybe not Stevie Ray. So that's where we are at this point. Next up, it's the match for the Cruiserweight Tag Team titles. It's Kidman and Rey Mysterio Jr. against 3 Count, a match that goes for 12 minutes and 11 seconds, and is won when Rey Mysterio Jr. pins Evan Courageous. Segment rating of 51 here. Rey Mysterio Jr. not quite strong as usual, but still everybody else was actually pretty decent, and segment rating of 51, I'm pretty happy with that as a decent match to continue this show. Next up, Kanyon comes out for his match with Tommy Dreamer, and he takes the microphone and he starts to laugh and tells Dreamer that he is a fool. He says that on Monday night he challenged him to a match but didn't mention anything about him being the one fighting Tommy Dreamer. He then says that the match, in fact, that Dreamer agreed to was against a man both are pretty familiar with, Bam Bam Bigelow. And Bam Bam Bigelow comes out ready for a match with Tommy Dreamer. So segment rating of 47 here. Kanyon was pretty good on the mic. This story continues here as Kanyon has swerved Tommy Dreamer into a match with Bam Bam Bigelow instead of himself. Their match then takes place at good heat and decent wrestling, and Bam Bam Bigelow beats Tommy Dreamer in 10:49 by pinfall following interference from Kanyon. Tommy Dreamer at 47, Bigelow at 48. Dreamer's slowly improving, and Bigelow is somebody I'm a big fan of, although he's sort of a bit later in his career at this point, and I'm not sure he's going to be a main event guy, but certainly somebody I wanted to start using, and he kind of gets drafted into this story as sort of an ally of Kanyon. Segment rating of 52, and gradually, just very gradually, each match is getting a little bit better than the one that came before. The next segment sees Tony Schiavone go into the locker room of the Magnificent Seven there. Scott Steiner, Ric Flair, Rick Steiner, Road Warrior Animal, Jeff Jarrett, Buff Bagwell, and Lex Luger are in good spirits. They're happy. They feel like they've got the advantage in the War Games match. Tony Schiavone asks them who was responsible for the attack on Stevie Ray on Monday. Scott Steiner says that they may know something about that, but it's all's fair in love and war. And this is War Games after all. Schiavone then asks Flair how he's feeling after Monday and missing out on winning his 17th world title. Flair says that that's in the past now, and he's just focused on making sure that the Magnificent Seven are victorious tonight. Schiavone then asks what will happen if Sting and company can't find another partner, and Steiner says that that's not their concern, and the stipulation of the match will remain. He says Booker T better get ready to shine the WCW title up real nice, because it's coming his way very soon. So Tony Schiavone underperformed here, but Steiner and Ric Flair looked good. As usual, Road Warrior Animal performed not particularly well. Rick Steiner was pretty good. Lex Luger wasn't so good. Generally a decent segment here. A rating of 60. Happy with this, and a good sort of insight into how the Magnificent Seven are feeling ahead of the War Games match. Next, it's the WCW World Tag Team title match in an bout that had fantastic heat and good wrestling. Totally Buff defeated Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo in 14:08 when Lex Luger submitted Chuck Palumbo, and Totally Buff make defense number 1 of their WCW World Tag Team titles. Everybody performed pretty well, and together as a whole, this was better than the sum of its parts. So Bagwell's the best performer at 62, but you can see our segment rating is 63. So these two teams seem to have a certain amount of chemistry, and they've got a good sort of story, a good feud going on. So a decent match here. Segment rating 63, best match of the night so far. Plenty still to come though. The next thing that takes place is Tony Schiavone backstage speaking to Sting, Booker T, and Curt Hennig. So he visits the dressing room of Sting's War Games team, and he asks Booker T what is going on with his brother Stevie Ray. Booker T says that his brother suffered a pretty bad injury to his back thanks to the Magnificent Seven and may not wrestle again. He says that Steiner is going to pay. Tony Schiavone then turns to Sting and asks him about his injury. Sting says that he's a little bruised, but he'll live. He says that Jeff Jarrett is a marked man and nothing's changed. The Magnificent Seven are going down. Schiavone finally asks what they're going to do tonight, as they are one teammate down. Curt Hennig then takes this a question and responds by saying that he shouldn't worry about that. They have found someone to join them tonight, and all will be revealed later on. So segment rating of 75. Sting didn't do well with that script to follow, but it didn't seem to harm the segment too much. And confirmation that there will be a 4-on-4 War Games, and there is somebody who will be taking Stevie Ray's place in the main event. It looks like Stevie Ray's going to be out injured, but Sting is able to take part. Next match is Hugh Morrus versus Vampiro, and in a bout that had great heat and decent wrestling, Vampiro defeated Hugh Morrus in 9:51 by pinfall. Both of them roughly the same in terms of their performance of 51 and of 52. Their story continues, and the segment overall rating was stronger than either of their performances of 58. So that's a real positive for those two as they continue. So Vampiro beats Hugh Morrus. And during the match, we saw Morrus showboat for the fans when in control of the bout, as he kind of tried to play to the fans as a babyface, but Vampiro got the win. After the contest, Vampiro grabs a microphone, and Morrus is sat in the ring, a little bit disappointed with himself for losing. Vampiro says that Morrus needs to take a long, hard look at himself. There's a reason he lost tonight, and that's because he's trying too hard. Trying too hard to make all these people like him. Trying too hard to be the friendly joker when deep down, all he wants to do is watch the world burn. Vampiro says that if Morrus ever wants to reach his full potential, he needs to know himself. So a rating of 51. Vampiro enjoyed having the freedom to go off script and perform well, and these two, their story continues here. So the next match is Bill Goldberg and Air Raid versus the franchise players Shane Douglas and KroniK. Throughout the match, Shane Douglas avoids getting in the ring with Goldberg. The franchise players cut the ring off on AJ Styles, and he takes one hell of a beating, which effectively eliminates him before he manages to just about make a tag to Air Paris. He and Goldberg rush the ring to take their opponents on, but KroniK double-team Goldberg while Douglas and Air Paris battle it out in the ring, and eventually Douglas pins Paris to take the victory in 11 minutes and 38 seconds. This was a disappointingly low-rated segment, 55. Shane Douglas is only a 56, and Goldberg is 77, but obviously lots of other people in the match, and KroniK were two of them, so that was never going to work out that well. You can see there AJ Styles an in-ring performance of 43, which doesn't look great, but is a continuing improvement for him pretty much every time he goes out there. So we are building AJ Styles pretty well at the moment. Then the next match is for the United States Heavyweight title. It's Mike Awesome versus Kevin Nash, and Mike Awesome wins in 15 minutes and 3 seconds by pinfall. Mike Awesome makes his first defense of the United States Heavyweight title. A segment rating of 71. Mike Awesome is 64. Kevin Nash is 69. A really quite decent match, this one. And I had to sort of negotiate a little bit with Kevin Nash over this one. And what happened here is that with Awesome and Nash tied up in the ropes and the ref trying to separate them, Awesome delivered a low blow and then splashed Nash from the top rope and got the pin to retain the title. And the reason I add that note is because I had to effectively protect Kevin Nash a little bit, keep him strong for this one, in order to convince him to do the job, because Kevin Nash still has, unbelievably, a creative control clause in his contract. And so I was a bit concerned when I saw that he wasn't going to do the job at all. He would just refuse to do the job, but he did do the job, but we just had to kind of keep him strong in order for him to do it. So a good match here, segment rating of 71. Very pleased with that indeed. So before the War Games match, as the two teams are coming out onto the stage and taking their positions, Sting gets on the microphone and introduces their fourth partner, Diamond Dallas Page. Diamond Dallas Page, a pretty over performer, and this got a 73 segment rating ahead of the War Games match. DDP is the final member of Sting's team. The War Games bout then itself. So in an exceptional match, Sting, Curt Hennig and Harlem Heat. Oh! Ignore what I've put there. Damn it. Ignore that. Sorry. Obviously a mix-up with the game. That should be DDP. Let's just ignore Stevie Ray's there. That is actually DDP. So Sting, Curt Hennig, DDP and Booker T defeat the Magnificent Seven in 31-13 when Curt Hennig pins Ric Flair. Again, ignore that Stevie Ray was the weak link because he's not in the match. It was actually DDP. Apologies, sometimes there's a lot to remember when you're playing this game. For some reason, it's just so many things to remember, and for whatever reason, I've mistakenly booked Stevie Ray into this match, so apologies for that. And that's probably why it's not got quite the rating I was hoping it would get. So anyway, tale of the match. First two in the ring are Booker T and Jeff Jarrett. Next to enter is Ric Flair, and the heels take control. Diamond Dallas Page is in next to enter, and the odds are evened. Then next to enter the match is Scott Steiner, but when the cage door is open to allow him in, Booker T flies through it and jumps onto Scott Steiner. The two then brawl through the crowd and out of sight. This leaves DDP at the mercy of Jeff Jarrett and Ric Flair. Next to enter is Sting, who evens the odds for the babyfaces again, and in particular goes after Jeff Jarrett. The final entrant for the Magnificent Seven is Rick Steiner, and he gives the heels the advantage again. Finally, Curt Hennig enters the fray. The match continues for a time, and eventually Hennig hits a Hennigplex on Flair for the ping. Sting, Curt Hennig, and DDP then celebrate in the ring after the match. So yeah, disappointing segment of 67. That probably would have been higher had this been DDP and not Stevie Ray. I don't imagine it would be too much higher though, maybe a 70. A difficult one to get right this. I was always a little bit concerned, and actually prior to the match I had to keep changing the safety levels of the match because the some of our broadcasters that we were showing this pay-per-view on were not happy with the danger levels of the match, and that's another reality of the game. So I had to keep changing that, and that kind of worried me in terms of how good this match would ultimately be. And yeah, so segment rating of 67, not absolutely great, but fine. It's okay. It's decent enough, and we've had our main event, and Sting, Curt Hennig, Booker T, and DDP, not Stevie Ray, have defeated the Magnificent Seven. So that is the end of the show, and we've gained popularity everywhere. So that main event being only a 67 wasn't a massive drain. It wasn't any kind of a drain. In fact, it's increased our popularity everywhere in the world that we've are showing this show. Massive crowd, obviously, which is going to really help us with our finances, which are in a little bit of a. They've been going down quite quickly so far in the game. We started with 10 million. I think we're already down to something like 7.5 million. So we definitely need some money coming in. Match of the night was surprisingly Mike Awesom's match against Kevin Nash for the US title, but that's fine. We've as I said, overall rating of 68. It's a pretty decent show in general. Really happy with the tag team title match. Totally Buff against Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo, and no matches under 50, which is really cool. So happy with that. I'm going to make the speech as is the regular thing. I think what we're going to do is we're actually going to praise Kevin Nash for a good performance, and Mike Awesome obviously for his performance in the same match. And then who else should I put in place here? I think we're gonna go with we'll go with Scott Steiner. I'm trying to keep him sweet because he is he's kind of one of the worst influences backstage, and we need him to kind of mature and not be such a dickhead because he's constantly causing problems backstage. So anyway, that was the Great American Bash. The Magnificent Seven have been put out of commission. Sting's team won the War Games match. We also had Mike Awesome successfully defend the US title. Totally Buff hold on to their tag team titles, and Rey Mysterio Jr. and Billy Kidman hold on to their Cruiserweight tag team championships. We also saw Vampiro defeat Hugh Morrus. Shane Douglas and KroniK get the victory over Bill Goldberg at Air Raid. And we saw Bam Bam Bigelow be introduced as the opponent for Tommy Dreamer, not Kanyon, as previously was thought to be the case. Just a news story here on the Great American Bash. The feedback has been that it was awesome. So again, we that's obviously relevant to your level of popularity. So if we were sort of in WWE's range of popularity, that show would have been considered a disappointment, certainly, because it would have been way lower than our overall level of popularity. But because it was a significant few points ahead of our popularity, they're saying the show is awesome. So that's another additional bit of increased popularity for WCW as a whole. So that is everything for today. A little bit of an extended, longer episode for the pay-per-view. As you might imagine, we've gone over a couple of things in addition to the show itself. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give me a like. That's really, really helpful. And of course, we'll be back next time with the day after's episode of WCW Nitro. But until then, thanks for watching.